Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
I'm Corey Evan. In tonight's report, a Germanwings plane goes down and the airline doesn't gather there are any survivors, and neither does Australia. Nigeria's courts have banned their military from deploying near the poles. And a law that has previously been used to jail abusive, quote-unquote, Facebook commentators in India is struck down in our continuing battle against global socialism.
I'm Jason Miller in San Diego. The U.S.-led coalition against Daesh has begun surveillance flights over the Iraqi city of Tikrit, which is being besieged by government forces. This as Canada plans to expand airstrikes against Danish militants. Israel strongly denied a report that it spied on the U.S.-led talks on Iran's nuclear program in order to build a case against a proposed deal. And we try to talk with Starbucks regarding their race relations program. We'll tell you what they said to us. All those stories and more on the Evan Miller Report, starting right now.
Live from Southern California, this is the Evan Miller Report. Jason Miller with news and politics, Corey Evan with business and entertainment. This is the Evan Miller Report on SHR Media. Here now, Jason Miller.
And a very good evening on this Tuesday, March the 24th, 2015. We have all those stories and more, but first, we have that breaking news tonight. And for the latest on that crash over the French Alps, we go over to Corey Evan up in Los Angeles. He has the latest on that tonight. Corey?
Good evening, Jay. 2 Australians are among 150 people killed in a Germanwings aeroplane crash in the French Alps, Foreign Minister Julie Bishop has said to ABC Australia News. Ms. Bishop said a woman and her adult son from Victoria, Australia were on flight 4U9525 from Barcelona to Dusseldorf, which went down with 144 passengers and 6 crew on board. Quote, I don't think it gets any easier announcing the death of Australian citizens in a tragedy overseas, Ms. Bishop said. Our thoughts and prayers and support are with the family of the victims, and we will continue to provide them whatever consular assistance they may require, unquote. Ms. Bishop said Australia will send a consular official to the southeastern French town of Gap, where they will set up a mobile office and liaise with the French authorities on the recovery effort. Tony Abbott also offered his condolences to the families who have lost relatives. Quote, our thoughts and prayers are with the friends and families of all those killed, but particularly with the loved ones of the 2 Australians who have lost their lives, Mr. Abbott said. Our consular officials are doing what they can for the families, unquote. Grieving relatives of passengers gathered at Barcelona and Dusseldorf airports as officials announced none of the 150 people on board survived. Several dozen relatives, some crying and shaking their heads, arrived at Barcelona's El Prat airport after news of the flight, which took off in the morning for Dusseldorf, had crashed. Police at the remote crash site in southeastern France said everyone on board was killed when the Airbus 320 operated by Lufthansa's budget carrier Germanwings went down. The airline's managing director, Thomas Winkelmann, said routine maintenance of the aircraft had been carried out the day before and said the company would work closely with investigators. With the cause of the accident a mystery, authorities have recovered a black box from the Airbus A320 at the crash site, where rescue efforts were hampered by the mountainous terrain. French officials halted the recovery operation at nightfall when the weather deteriorated. Local MP Christophe Castaner, who flew over the site, said on Twitter, quote, horrendous images in this mountain scenery. Nothing is left but debris and bodies. A horror. The plane is totally destroyed. A senior airline official said they were working on the accident, on the assumption the crash was an accident, that is. Quote, for the time being, we say it's an accident. Anything else would be speculation, Lufthansa VP for Sales and Services in Europe, Heike Berlenbach, said. It is believed 67 German and 45 Spanish nationals were on board the flight, including 2 babies. Also believed to be among the victims were 16 kids and 2 teachers from the Joseph Koenig Gymnasium High School in the town of Haltern am See in northwest Germany, a spokeswoman said. Local mayor of Linares de Val, a town north of Barcelona, Martí Pujol, said pupils were in shock at a local high school where 16 of the passengers on the plane had just attended an exchange program. He said the children ranged about 15. It was a reciprocal visit after 12 Spanish students had spent a week at their school in December. Students and teachers at the Haltern MC High School broke down in tears once they realized their classmates and teachers were on board the ill-fated flight. The students were sent home, but many returned in the afternoon with candles in their hands and tears in their eyes to mourn with each other at the school. Mayor Bodo Klimpel said that some parents drove to the airport and some to the school. And stay with us here at SHR Media. We will bring you the latest updates on the story as they become available. At the moment, keep an eye on our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report. We will post up details as they become available. And Jason Miller, very tragic accident there. And to think that it happened on what should have been a routine flight. They just did the work on the plane the day before.
Absolutely, Corey. It's quite disturbing to me, and considering that airplane is 24 years old, never has had a problem since the start date of its service 24 years ago. Was watching the international news channels today, and one analyst on the BBC News channel said earlier today that he was concerned that this may not be an accident after all, just the way the flight was descending and how it crashed looks suspicious. But that's coming from one analyst. I still think it's probably too soon yet to predict whether it was an accident or whether it was intentional. But of course, as Corey Evans said, we'll keep an eye on this report. Corey Evans,
and of course, I don't mean to rule out terrorism in any way, but you have to realize that some of the crashes could just be the result of human error.
That's very true. All right, Corey Evan will be back a little bit later with some news out of Nigeria this evening. But first, we start. Second of all, ladies and gentlemen, we go over to the Iraqi city of Tikrit, where coalition officials said support when it came to surveillance flights over the Iraqi city of Tikrit. They would not say whether airstrikes would also be carried out. Until now, the U.S. has had no involvement in the Iranian-backed operation in Tikrit. But a Pentagon spokesman said the assault had stalled with Daesh militants in the city's center dug in. This is the first attempt to push out Daesh from a major urban center in Iraq and is seen as a test for an operation to retake the country's second largest city, Mosul, which alongside with Tikrit was seized last June. The operation to take Tikrit, which lies about 100 miles north of Baghdad, began earlier this month with more than 20,000 soldiers, police, and Shia militiamen from the popular mobilization Hashedi Shababi units attacking from all directions. Iranian military advisors, led by many generals in the region, helped coordinate that assault. Despite having no support from coalition aircraft, the government's forces made rapid advances, capturing outlying towns and villages along the river Tigris and entering northern and southern districts of the city. But the offensive has stalled in the past 2 weeks, with army and militia suffering heavy casualties and the city center remaining firmly in the control of several hundred Daesh militants who have planted a large number of bombs in roads and buildings. This, as Canada will now extend its airstrike campaign against Daesh into Syria, Prime Minister Stephen Harper has announced. He said, quote, "In our view, ISIL or ISIS must cease to have any safe haven in Syria," Mr. Harper said in the House of Commons. Canada's mission against Daesh will also be extended for 1 year beyond October's election and well into 2016. Opposition leaders have criticized Mr. Harper for drawing Canada into a war with unclear objectives. The move means Canada will be the first NATO country other than the U.S. to strike inside Syria. Moving on to Russia tonight, where they have warned the U.S. against sending a ballistic missile defense system to South Korea, saying it could threaten regional security. Washington says it wants to deploy the system known as THAAD to South Korea as a deterrent to military provocation by North Korea. Such a development cannot but cause concern about the destructive influence of the United States global missile defense on international security, said Russia's foreign ministry in a statement today. The statement continued to say, quote, in a region where the situation is already extremely complicated in terms of security, this could serve as another push toward an arms race in Northeast Asia and further complicate any resolution of the nuclear issues on the Korean Peninsula. End quote. China has already warned that deployment of the system would undermine peace and stability in the region. Faced with growing isolation from the West over the Ukrainian crisis, Russia has moved to bolster ties with former Cold War ally North Korea. Moscow and Pyongyang have named 2015 a year of friendship between the two countries, and the Kremlin says reclusive leader Kim Jong-un is set to make his first official trip abroad to visit Russia's World War II victory commemoration in May. South Korea and the U.S. will launch a massive landing drill on March the 28th as the climax of an ongoing joint military exercise which North Korea views as an invasion rehearsal. Meanwhile, lawmakers in Britain urgently from the House of Commons urged to rebuild defense capabilities abandoned after the Cold War to face growing global threats, including from Russia. A committee of lawmakers warned on Tuesday. The Commons Defense Committee, which examines the spending and policy of the Defense Ministry, said nuclear capacity tanks and warships and aircraft were needed to deter Russian President Vladimir Putin. The world is more dangerous and unstable than at any time since the end of the Cold War, the report said, referring to Russia's annexation of Crimea and seizure of territory by Daesh and Boko Haram militants, now all one terrorist group. The statement continued to say, but the UK's current defence assumptions are not sufficient for this changed environment. The UK must rebuild its conventional capabilities eroded since the Cold War. The report comes as a truce between pro-Russian rebels and Ukrainian forces was tested in East Ukraine, in a conflict that has damaged relations between Russia and the West and has claimed up to 6,000 lives since April. The committee said it would be necessary for Britain to stick to its NATO commitment to spend 2% of GDP on defense, but this would not be sufficient. It pointed out weaknesses in NATO's defense, meanwhile, saying that Russia could deploy up to 150,000 troops in up to 72 hours, while it would take NATO up to 6 months to do so. NATO newly announced Very Highly Readiness Joint Task Force that could deploy up to 5,000 troops in 48 hours, but would not be ready until 2016, the report said. The report also said it was difficult to mobilize critical mass in the air as Britain's Royal Air Force has been cut to 7 squadrons from 33, while the Royal Navy's freights and destroyers fleet had more than halved since the 1990s. However, Defense Secretary Michael Fallon of the UK dismissed the report, saying the Conservative-led government of David Cameron had plunged a black hole in the defense budget. The UK has the second largest defense budget in NATO and the largest in the EU, Fallon said. We are the U.S.'s largest partner in the coalition air effort against Daesh, bearing more of the load in terms of strikes in Iraq than we ever played in the Gulf Wars, he said. All right, moving on to another big story that was overshadowed slightly today by that air crash over in the French Alps. Israel has strongly denied a report by the Wall Street Journal that it spied on the U.S.-led talks on Iran's nuclear program in order to build a case against a deal that's being formed over in Europe right now. A senior Israeli official told the BBC that the claims reported by the U.S. newspaper The Wall Street Journal were utterly false. The journal said the White House had been particularly angered that Israel allegedly sought to share confidential details with U.S. lawmakers and others. Many Republicans in Congress are opposed to a deal with Iran. Earlier this month, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told a joint session of Congress that a deal being discussed could pave Iran's path to the bomb. The US, UK, France, Germany, Russia, and China are seeking an agreement to curtail Iran's nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. They fear Iran wants to build a nuclear bomb, something Iran denies. Israel is not party to the negotiations, although it feels particularly threatened by the possibility of a nuclear-armed Iran. Meanwhile, Senator Bob Corker, chairman of the State Foreign Relations Committee, answered questions at a press conference following the weekly policy luncheon of the Republican caucus at the U.S. Capitol in Washington. In Washington, D.C. Sorry, I read that. That was a wrong quote. But he did speak on Tuesday and flatly denied that the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's influence in Congress means that he could kill a nuclear agreement with Iran. Corker, speaking in an interview with Yahoo News, also played down a Wall Street Journal report from late Monday that Israel had spied on the talks with Tehran, saying he had regularly learns about the negotiations from other countries' foreign ministers other than from the Obama administration. Asked whether the Israeli leader enjoyed a de facto veto over a potential deal, Corker emphatically replied, no. He continued, I don't get that sense at all. I just don't think he's influenced Senate's responses to the ongoing negotiations. If you look at what happened, he was actually pressing for Kirk Mendes to be voted on prior to the deal happening. It didn't happen, did it? Corker said. He was referring to legislation crafted by Republican Senator Mark Kirk and the Democratic Senator Robert Mendes that would impose new sanctions on Iran in the event that ongoing talks fail to yield a comprehensive deal by June the 30th. Negotiators from Iran and the so-called P5+1, Britain, China, France, Germany, Russia, and the U.S. hope to seal the political framework agreement by the end of March, to be followed by a more technical accord before July. And stay with us here at the Evan Miller Report. We'll keep you up to date on all the developments on that possible negotiation with Iran. One more international story on my end before I send it over to Corey Evan to wrap up today's international news. The U.S. will keep nearly 10,000 troops in Afghanistan through 2015, delaying plans for a gradual withdrawal, the White House has said today. The U.S. and Afghanistan announced the change of a plan at a press conference in Washington between President Obama and President Jahin of Afghanistan. Despite ongoing security issues there, Mr. Obama has promised to end America's longest war by the end of his term. He said the U.S. will now leave a small force at the U.S. Embassy by the end of 2016. Originally, officials planned to cut the U.S. troop presence by 5,500 by the end of 2015. The leaders discussed troop numbers over a working lunch and in meetings before the press conference today. With the prospect of a tough spring fighting season on the horizon, Daesh militants trying to recruit on Afghan soil and other security concerns, the U.S. will keep 9,800 troops in Afghanistan. Mr. Obama said today, quote, Afghanistan remains a very dangerous place, adding that the size of the U.S. troop presence for 2016 will be decided on later this year. Mr. Obama also said Mr. Ghani's visit was an opportunity to begin a new chapter between our two nations, those nations being the U.S. and Afghanistan, to paraphrase, ladies and gentlemen. The Afghan president said the slower withdrawal would allow Afghan forces to be better trained and equipped. Tragedy brought us together. Interests now unite us, Mr. Ghani said, adding the people of Afghanistan were well placed to speak truth to terror. They do not speak for Islam, we do. The lunch and meetings came just as gunmen killed at least 13 people in eastern Afghanistan overnight, and separately a suspected U.S. drone strike near the Afghan-Pakistani border killed at least 9 militants. And now I'm going to send it over to Corey Evan, who has the rest of our international news. I'll be back in just a moment for the remembrance of 70 years since the Battle of Iwo Jima. Corey, take it away.
That's going to be a great thing to remember. According to Reuters, the Nigeria Federal High Court in Lagos has barred the military from deploying around polling stations during March 28th national elections. The lawyer from the parliamentarian who brought the case said on Tuesday, opposition leader Femi Bajamila, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but it starts with a G, I'll tell you that. He had argued that such deployment would violate the Constitution. Lawyer Lijoma Nejamanzi said, amid opposition fears that soldiers could be used to intimidate voters. The ruling, made on Monday by Justice Ibrahim Buba, does not affect troops already dispatched to northeast Nigeria, where they are needed to battle an Islamist insurgency, she added. The tight election pits President Goodluck Jonathan against former military ruler Muhammadu Buhari. It was meant to take place on February 14th, but was delayed by 6 weeks because the military said it could not guarantee security, especially in the northeast, where Islamists have waged a 6-year insurgency. Jonathan is seeking a second elected term in the closest fought election since the end of military rule in 1999. If the military deploys despite the court order, the opposition is likely to use that fact to dispute the result should it lose the parliamentary and presidential ballot. The military's role in the electoral process, including pressing for the vote to be delayed, has alarmed some Nigerians, reminding them of dictatorship, which included the annulment of a 1993 vote by a military government. The case was brought after an outcry over the heavy deployment of troops in southwestern Ekiti and Osun states last year. Reports in the press alleged that soldiers had conspired to intimidate voters and rig a by-election in Ekiti, a charge the military and ruling party declined to deny or confirm. Electoral officials said on Tuesday about 82% of Nigerian voters had collected the cards they need to present at polling stations to take part in Saturday's election, leaving 18% of registered voters disenfranchised. After the decision to postpone the vote from February, there has been a concerted push against Boko Haram militants, especially by neighbors Chad and Niger, chasing them out of much of the territory they had previously controlled. There have been fears that millions of Nigerians in areas affected by the insurgency, including 1 million internal refugees, would be unable to vote. The commission said about 56.7 million voter cards had been collected by Nigerians. Back home in the U.S., I thought he was going to play that little theme, but anyway. A friend of one of the Boston Marathon's bombers. Forgive me, folks, I timed that pretty poorly there. But a friend of one of the Boston Marathon bombers has pled guilty to misleading investigators. Hairulazan Matanov has appeared today in federal court. Judge William Young asked Matanov if he understood the agreement with prosecutors, which calls for a 30-month sentence. Matanov says he's innocent, but there are enough facts to convict him, and he doesn't want to face a possible 20 years in prison. Well, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. Sentencing is scheduled for June. Matanov was a close friend of Tamerlan Tsarnaev's and an acquaintance of his brother, Johar Tsarnaev. Prosecutors say Matanov deceived authorities about his relationship with Tamerlan after the April 2013 bombings. Tamerlan died after a gunfight with police, as you may well know. Matanov was charged with lying and with deleting info from his computer. His lawyer hasn't said if he plans to testify in Zokar's trial. Moving on to Pennsylvania, the AP tells me a school bus carrying grade school students slammed through the front of a home on Tuesday, alarming residents and causing significant damage, but injuring only the driver, officials said. Whew, that was a close one. But if I may be so bold, I think I can classify this guy as the idiot of the day. There we are. Just had to grab my microphone there. 9 students from St. Helena School were aboard the bus when it crashed in Bluebell, Whitpain Township around 7:45 a.m., police said. They were evaluated by the school nurse and given soft pretzels by the principal. The bright yellow bus remained on the suburban Philadelphia home's front lawn, its front end wedged into the living room for about 5 hours as police investigated. Quote, "It's shocking, very shocking," said neighbor Joseph Smalley. "The kids, thank God, were okay," unquote. The driver of the Wissahickon School District bus was taken to a hospital. The extent of his injuries wasn't immediately clear, the fire chief said. Neighbors said he had no recollection of the crash and wanted to know if the children were okay. They said he may have blacked out. 4 people inside the home were unhurt, thankfully. Neighbor Adam Glazer said he saw the bus accelerating up the winding street and wondered if it would stop. He said the bus swerved and knocked out a street sign before crashing into the home. Glazer said a student on the bus opened an emergency exit door and led her classmates out the back of the bus. The Catholic school, which serves students from pre-kindergarten through 8th grade in Bluebell, posted a message on its Facebook page saying the students were doing well. The school thanked people for their prayers and concern. So at least everyone there is doing okay, and hopefully the bus driver will survive. And forgive me, folks, I may have misclassified this driver, because if he did indeed black out, then it's totally my fault. I am done with my stories, Jay. I will go ahead and toss it back to you, because you've got something to honor our veterans, haven't you?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much on that, Corey. Iwo Jima, a military base known, is open to outsiders for only 1 day each year, and then only to U.S. veterans, their families, and very few journalists traveling with them. 70 years on from the terrible battle that was fought there, 26 veterans have come back. One of them, the youngest, in his 80s. Most are in their early 90s. And as the BBC's Rupert Winfield Hayes reports tonight, some of the memories are just like yesterday. We're going to go ahead and now go to Rupert's report.
Today, on the tiny island of Iwo Jima, the only thing disturbing the silence is the sound of birdsong. But 70 years ago, this place was a vision of hell, as the US Marine Corps fought inch by inch to take the island from its Japanese defenders. It remains the bloodiest battle in US Marine Corps history. Today, on top of Mount Suribachi, more than 20 survivors of that battle have come back. Now in their 90s, it is perhaps their last chance. Corporal Herschel Woody Williams was a flamethrower operator, a job few survived for very long. He won the Congressional Medal of Honor on the same day this iconic photograph was taken of the US flag being raised over Mount Suribachi.
It was the flag, as far as I'm concerned, that made the difference. This was the first time that we really got their country, part of their country. And that said to us, and I think it said to America, hey, we're winning this thing. We are now winning. And up until that point, there were a lot of us didn't think we were.
Looking down to the beach where he landed 70 years ago, the memories flood back.
I'm thinking of those who didn't make it home. I'm thinking of the heroes who died. I'm not a hero, they are. All the heroes didn't get to come home.
These US veterans are rightly celebrated for the sacrifices they made here on Iwo Jima 70 years ago. In fact, back in the US, they're still to this day known as the greatest generation. But the same cannot be said for the Japanese men who served here. In fact, it's telling that there is only one Japanese veteran here today, and the only way he could get here was by coming with the Americans. That man is 88-year-old Tsurugi Akikusa. Today there is great excitement that he is here. The American veterans all want to have their photograph taken with him. But Mr. Akikusa is looking tense.
It is very hard. In my mind, images of what happened then have suddenly come flooding back. I feel very, very sad.
It's hard to imagine what those memories are like. As an 18-year-old, Mr. Akikusa spent 2 months deep in a tunnel like this one under Iwo Jima. He was badly injured and slowly starving to death.
The Americans pumped water into the cave. We are filthy. It's stuck of excrement and dead bodies. So some jumped into the water to wash. Then the water exploded. Gasoline was mixed with the water. The cave became a sea of flame. Their skin was hanging and bleeding. It was like hell.
Many here.
Despite this, he says he holds no grudge against his former enemies. He says they all experienced sacrifice and loss. And they all have one thing in common: an abhorrence of war. Rupert Wingfield Hayes, BBC News, on the island of Iwo Jima.
And we thank Rupert Winfield Hayes from BBC World News and giving us that report this evening on the remembrance of Iwo Jima 70 years ago and the greatest generation fighting for America. It sure tells you, ladies and gentlemen, when a hero from Iwo Jima says he's not a hero. My goodness. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time to take a break on the program. When we come back tonight on the program, Deputy Homeland Security Secretary General Marconis' image has been tainted in the integrity of the immigration program he oversaw has been fostered in an appearance of favoritism and special access. We'll give you that report in the DC News tonight. Also tonight, House Republicans vowed to close ranks on a supported budget plan. And one medical group says previously disclosed VOG documents inquiry involves other medical companies in regards to Medicare Advantage programs. We have all those stories and more. Plus, Corey Evan has what's coming up in the business report.
Consumers paid more for goods last month, Jay, but if this helps with your travel costs, American Airlines is blending theirs and U.S. Airways rewards programs. We go around the world in tonight's special edition of Lawsuits via the magic of Facebook data collection. And Taylor Swift catches wind of a school test with her misheard lyrics. That's going to be interesting to hear after the break. You're listening to SHR Media. We'll be right back.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Is radio.
Fact news. Fact news.
Radio.
Fact news. Fact news.
Radio.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
How you doing? John Grant here. When I'm not slaving over a hot microphone on the 405radio.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, I check out Sean and Clint here at Sackheads Radio. We all appreciate the best political bloggers, writers, and commentators. We either get them on our shows or we make fun of them, as it should be. So check us out live Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern or forever on the podcasts on the 405radio.com.
This is Tammy Jackson, inviting you to join me on the Tammy Jackson Show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific on the 405radio.com. Put down that remote and tune into the show that covers politics, guns and the Second Amendment, religious liberty, sanctity of life, the military, and more. I host newsworthy guests and work hard to be a conservative radio show that's not like all the others. So save Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific for me, Tammy Jackson, on the 405media.com.
Hello, I'm Paul, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is my professor, Dr. Larry Arnn, on the separation of church and state.
America's founders believed in the separation of church and state, in that the country was not to have an official religion or an official sect. But that did not mean that government was to be hostile to religion, or even indifferent to religion, as many today argue. In fact, America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, includes both a reference to God as the author of the laws of nature and a confident assertion that human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Far from being hostile or indifferent to religion, America's founders understood the theology of the Declaration to be an essential part of the education of citizens.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
Hi, this is Rooster from Outcry Radio. Catch me here on Blog Talk Radio every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Or follow my blog.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
the Evan Miller Report. I'm Jason Miller. It's now time for the latest market news. Here's Corey Evan.
Thank you, Jay. And I'm seeing red all over Wall Street. The Dow lost 104 points at 18,011. The Nasdaq down 16 at 49.94. And the S&P 500 down 12 points at 20.91. And I still see even more red as I look at other stocks, like even Apple's down. And Sprint's down. I'm not surprised at that. Asian markets experienced mixed fortunes after surveys indicated weaker manufacturing growth in China and Japan, according to the BBC. The region's two largest economies saw factory activity expand at a slower pace in March, suggesting that their recoveries may be losing momentum. Hong Kong's Hang Seng ended down 0.4% at 24,399, while Japan's Nikkei closed 1.1% lower at 19,734. The Shanghai Composite refers earlier losses to close up 0.1% at 36.91. That marks the 10th consecutive daily gain for the mainland benchmark. Australian shares also closed higher, with the S&P ASX 200 rising 0.2% to 59.69, thanks to a rally in gold mining stocks. South Korean shares followed that trend, with the Kospi index ending up 0.2% at 2041, its highest finish in 6 months. China's factory activity fell to an 11-month low in March after new orders decreased, a survey indicated. This because of the dock strike in the west coast of the U.S., no doubt. The flash HSBC Market Purchasing Managers Index fell to 49.2 in March, down from February's figure of 50.7. U.S. consumer prices rebounded last month as gas prices. June official figures show the consumer price index rose by 0.2% in February, but remained unchanged from a year earlier, the Department of Labor said. The monthly rise follows 3 consecutive months of declines, including a 0.7% drop in January. Gas prices rose 2.4% in February after having fallen by 18.7% in January. But prices remain volatile, according to Ryan Sweet of Moody's Analytics. Last week, the Fed modified its stance on interest rates, suggesting that it could seek to raise rates in the next few months. Economists expect the strong dollar to keep inflation in check in the coming months, as it should make imported goods cheaper. The dollar has risen sharply in value against the euro in the past year, and the yen, as the U.S. economy has grown more quickly than those of Europe and Japan, they say. Indeed. And American Airlines Group, formed in the 2013 merger with U.S. Airways Group, is moving a step closer to completing the tie-up by combining the carrier's frequent flyer plans on March 28th. Members of U.S. Airways' Dividend Miles loyalty program will be folded into American's AAdvantage, swelling its ranks to about 100 mil and making it the biggest in the industry. Fort Worth, Texas-based American is outlining the changes Tuesday in a message to travelers. The move to a single plan is one of several milestones this year that will finish the integration at the world's largest carrier, and is among the most important to passengers concerned that they may lose benefits or award status. The shift completes work that began on the 2 mileage programs in January of last year, about a month after the American-U.S. Airways merger closed. Balances from the U.S. Airways Dividend Miles program will be transferred to AAdvantage on a 1-to-1 basis beginning March 26th, with the bulk of the work completed on March 28th. Some chores will last into early April, American said. American expects to also receive a single operating certificate this quarter from the federal regulators that will allow it to fly the 2 carriers as one airline, instead of continuing to use the U.S. Airways and American names. So there you are, ladies and gentlemen. If you like the U.S. Airways name, well, take a picture. It'll last longer. Right, that's what I got for you in business today, ladies and gentlemen. And if I did offend any U.S. Airways fans, well, I can't win. That's all I can say.
All I gotta say, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to that, it's not our choice when we report this stuff. That's the news, as we like to put it here on the program.
Exactly. So, if you were a fan of U.S. Airways, well, you've got the memories, but unfortunately, American Airlines have decided nothing more.
Well, at least it's still American. That's
yes, definitely. That much I'm happy about.
Yeah, that can be sure. All right, Corey Evan will be back in a couple minutes with tonight's lawsuits across the world and the entertainment report. We look forward to that. A couple minutes. Now it's time for the D.C. news. With defense and deficit hawks still eyeing each other warily over the federal budget, House Republican leaders, predicted today that their fractious caucus would close ranks and support a 10-year balanced budget plan. Some Republican lawmakers want more military spending, while others focus on keeping the budget deficit under control. To overcome these differences, leaders will give lawmakers a choice of plans to vote on in the hope that one will pass. Beginning on Wednesday, the House of Representatives was expected to begin voting on a range of differing blueprints, including 3 from Republicans who now control both chambers of Congress. These call for deep cuts to social safety net programs. Whatever emerges from Republicans' votes has little to no chance of actually becoming law, but it will help Republicans' efforts to show that they can work together and govern. The Senate also lodged a debate on its Republican-authored budget on Tuesday, passing non-binding amendments to look for savings to aid veterans and shield children and the disabled from cuts to the Medicaid health care program for the poor. Speaking of Medicare and Medicaid, Humana Inc., one of the largest U.S. providers of Medicare Advantage health care plans for older people, said today that it believes a previously disclosed government query for the information is part of a wider review involving many health care companies. Humana first said the U.S. Department of Justice had asked to volunteer information about risk adjustment matters back on February the 18th. Humana believes that this request for information is in connection with a wider review of Medicare risk adjustment generally that includes a number of Medicare Advantage plans, providers, and vendors, the company said in a regulatory filing today. The disclosure came the morning after DeVilta Healthcare Partners, Inc. said in a regulatory filing of its own that its JSA Medical Group unit had received a subpoena from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Office of Inspector General, which the GSA provides medical services through clinics and pharmacies. DeVita said it had been advised by the Justice Department lawyer that the subpoena related to a civil investigation of Humana and its providers' risk adjustment practices and data, including patient diagnosis. DeVita said the time period involved was from 2008 to 2013. To read this full report, go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report. We'll have that full report there for you for your reading pleasure if you decide you want to read through all that insurance mumbo-jumbo. All right, moving over to Illinois now in the political news. The Illinois House of Representatives on Tuesday approved a bill that would plug a $1.6 billion hole in the state's budget by cutting spending on most programs by 2.25% and tapping money from other funds. The Illinois House voted 69-48 on the measure and 73-45 on a related bill to appropriate funding for some key services that are running out of money. The bill is now moved to the Illinois State Senate, where Senate President John Cullerton will meet with his Democratic caucus to gauge support, said Rikas Fallon, his spokeswoman. Cullerton said last month that the questionable $6.6 billion in spending cuts and savings that new Republican Governor Bruce Rayner put in his $32 billion fiscal 2016 budget proposal on February the 18th made reaching an agreement on the fiscal 2015 budget fix more difficult. Earlier on Tuesday, top aides to Rayner testified before the House Executive Committee in favor of the democratically sponsored legislation to fix the current budget. He noted the legislation, Richard Goldberg noted the legislation offered by Democratic House Speaker Michael Madigan does not rely on higher taxes or borrowing. All right, folks, and that's a wrap on the political news because we have an update tonight on our continuing battle. What's that, Core?
Global socialism, alert people!
Thank you very much, Corey. And we start off with an update on a story we brought to you yesterday here on the programs. Well, remember that Starbucks PR campaign to unite customers with conversations about race, which appears to have backfired as the company's big rollout was widely mocked? Well, ladies and gentlemen, that little PR campaign is not over. That, according to a letter from Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz to Starbucks partners regarding Race Together. I'll read part of this tonight, part of this letter. I want to offer my heartfelt thanks to every one of you for your fearless and energetic support of the Race Together initiative. Our objective from the very start of this effort, dating back to our first open forum in Seattle last December, was to stimulate conversation, empathy, and compassion towards one another, and then to broaden the dialogue beyond just our Starbucks family to the greater American public by using our scale for good. He continues on later in the letter, stating this phase of the effort, writing race together or placing stickers on cups, which was always just the catalyst for a much broader and longer term conversation, will be complete as originally planned today on March the 22nd. He continues to say, ladies and gentlemen, this initiative is far from over. We have a number of planned race together activities in the weeks and months to come. More partner open forums, 3 more special sections co-produced with the newspaper USA Today over the course of next year, more open dialogue with police and community leaders in cities across our country, a continued focus on jobs and education for our nation's young people, plus our commitment to hire more than 10,000 opportunity youth over the next 3 years, expanding our store footprint in urban communities across the country, and new partnerships to foster dialogue and empathy and help bridge the racial and ethnic divides within our society that have existed for so many years. End quote. Well, does that sound like global socialism to you, ladies and gentlemen? Sure does to me. So, ladies and gentlemen, we at the Evan Miller Report decided today to contact Starbucks and ask for Howard Schultz to come on the program to explain this bridge to race today. We got this response from Starbucks, which I will partially read on the program. Quote, thank you for your interest in Starbucks. Unfortunately, we have to politely decline your request to CEO Howard Schultz. As you can imagine, we receive a large number of similar requests and cannot always accommodate. Apologies, we are not able to facilitate your piece further at this time. So, ladies and gentlemen, Starbucks is willing to talk to you in their supposed coffee shops, and they're willing to talk to you out on the street, but they're not willing to speak to you here on this very program on the radio. As we said, the Evan Miller Report did try to reach out to Starbucks to have them come on and explain their little program about race on the program. But it sure shows to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that when it comes to speaking to conservative organizations and like SHR and conservative
they won't
programs,
do it.
Yeah, absolutely right. My co-host Corey Evan puts it right. They don't want to do it because, ladies and gentlemen, they don't want to face the facts that they are wrong about this issue and that they are stirring up more trouble than it is worth, ladies and gentlemen. So, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who go to Starbucks, Starbucks may want to think of maybe going to Dunkin' Donuts. Yes, I am a Starbucks guy, and now I'm probably not going to be going over to Starbucks no more. And for those of you who watch Wheel of Fortune, Seattle's Best Coffee is part of that Starbucks company, just to be clear on that, ladies and gentlemen.
Bummer.
And Corey always loved that Seattle's Best Coffee. Just the
Not really.
He's not a coffee drinker, ladies and gentlemen. That was a joke. But it still emphasizes, ladies and gentlemen, that Starbucks, they're willing to talk to people. They're just not willing to talk to us. Sure shows to tell you, double standard on the socialist communist left today. All right, moving on, because we have more in our continuing battle against global socialism tonight. The United Nations has voted to extend staff benefits to same-sex couples working for the UN, defeating Russian-led opposition to the measure. The UN Budget Committee recognized gay spouses regardless of whether or not gay marriage is legal in their country of origin. Previously, the UN followed national legislation on the issue. The vote went 80-43 against Russia's resolution, which had backing from China, India, and Muslim countries. EU member states and the U.S. lobbied hard against the resolution and for the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon's plan to include gay couples in the staff's benefits scheme. All right, one more tonight, ladies and gentlemen, before I send over to Corey Evan to wrap up our battle against global socialism tonight. India's Supreme Court has struck down a controversial law which allowed police to arrest people for comments on social networks and other internet sites. the court ruled that the controversial Section 66A of the Information Technology Act was unconstitutional. In recent years, several people have been arrested for their comments on Facebook or Twitter, sparking outrage. The government has defended the law, saying it was meant to deter people from uploading offensive material. Tuesday's order was delivered by a two-judge bench of the Supreme Court on petitions filed by civil rights groups and a law student who argued that Section 66A violated people's fundamental right to freedom of speech and expression. And now I send it over to Corey Evan, who concludes tonight's Global Socialism segment.
There we are. A new lawsuit accusing Chicago of ignoring due process when enforcing its system of red light and speed cameras. According to the Chicago Sun-Times, the suit claims Mayor Rahm Emanuel's administration violated its own rules by not issuing a second notice before it started giving fines. The suit claims the city failed to specify the make of the vehicle, which is required under state law. It also says the city assesses late penalties before the legally required 25-day grace period. 3 plaintiffs are named in the lawsuit now, and Jay, I separated this out from lawsuits just because I feel photo radar is just yet another form of global socialism.
Ah, si, senor.
Yeah, and it's a good lead-in, don't you see? But at any rate, it could grow to class action since the plaintiffs who were penalized since 2000 were victims of the first set of cameras installed. If that happens, the city may have to refund $600 million if it loses in court. The lawsuit also seeks an injunction on the city collecting on future violations until the mistakes are fixed. There you are, Jay. So, when will the world's spoody leaders mean the meaning of spoof? Why haven't more cities gotten rid of those spoody red light cameras? And how did Daggett from the Angry Beavers manage to drill the word spoody into my head? Stay tuned for more spoody developments in our continuing battle against global spoodyism.
Corey Evan with tonight's Global Socialism. Thank you very much. And the isn't gone yet because it's now time for lawsuits across the world, ladies and gentlemen.
And now it's time for lawsuits across America. The cases are real. All rise for the Honorable Corey Evan.
Thank you very much, and please be seated, folks. We got to get right into this. The future of how Europeans' data is shared with U.S. companies such as Facebook and Google is set to be considered by the EU's highest court, according to the BBC. Lawyer and activist Max Schrems said revelations by whistleblower Ed Snowden showed agreed privacy practices were being ignored by Facebook and others. He called for the current safe harbor deal, which allows the transfer of data to U.S. firms, to be scrapped. Facebook has not commented on the case. At a hearing in Luxembourg on Tuesday, the European Court of Justice's Advocate General said he would give his final opinion on June 24th, and the ECJ will make its final decision thereafter. Tesco is facing potential legal action from UK institutional shareholders following its accounting scandal. U.S. law firm Scott & Scott is claiming Tesco's overstatement of its profits last year caused a, quote, permanent destruction of value to shareholders, unquote. Scott & Scott said it was in active discussions with institutions in the UK and Europe about filing a claim, but that none had yet signed up. Tesco declined to comment on the possible action. The firm has already filed a class action lawsuit against the supermarket chain in the U.S., accusing it of misleading investors. Fresh and easy, anyone? I mean, honestly, that place has yet to make a profit, and the way it's going, it doesn't sound like it will. And I'll be brief with this last one. The manager of World Gym owes more than $475,000 in late rent payments, according to a lawsuit filed in Benton County Circuit Court. World Gym closed its doors this week in the Bentonville and Lowell facilities due to unforeseen circumstances, according to a note found at the businesses. And here's a part of the list of what they owe. Southeast J Street facility, Southwest Regional Airport Boulevard facility, Lowell facility, totaling up easily over $70,000. And there's over $323,000 at one of their Lowell facilities owed in rent payments, believe it or not. So I'm going to go ahead and post this one up on the Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report, because this one's actually interesting. I figured I'd bring it home on that note. And now it's time to declare that case dismissed. because we have entertainment to do. The Princeton Review, a popular test prep company, took a swing at Taylor Swift in one of their practice exams, but there was just one problem. The company actually misquoted Swift's song 15 for their SAT practice test before knocking the popular singer for the lyrics' supposedly back grammar. I know, right?
Coming
yes,
for in
this
the
is from the
report.
Blaze, absolutely.
This. Wow. How about this?
The question on the test quoted Swift singing, "Somebody tells you they love you, you gotta believe them." The song actually reads, "Somebody tells you they love you, you're gonna believe them." As the Hollywood Reporter notes, the latter lyric is grammatically sound, and Swift responded to the mess on her popular Tumblr page after a fan drew attention to it. Quote, "Not the right lyrics at all," Psh, she wrote. "You had one job, test people. One job." And I'll be brief with this last one. Jennifer Lawrence, Oscar winner, Hunger Games, and all-around person you want to have lunch with, has also been spending some time as the shape-shifting young Mystique in the X-Men franchise, but it seems her mutant days are almost over. She has been quoted as saying that this next film, X-Men Apocalypse, it is my last one, yes, quote-unquote. So, Jay, when Apocalypse comes on out, you might want to head on out to see it because she's not making it anymore.
Well, then all we have to look forward to after that is her closing of the franchise of the Hunger Games, as we know.
Exactly. And that one's on its way.
Yep, it certainly will be on its way out. And, ladies and gentlemen, that is the Evan Miller Report for this Tuesday, March the 24th, 2015. I'm Jason Miller.
And I'm Corey Evan. Follow us on Facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report and tweet us at EM Radio Report. You'll be glad you did. For all of us here at SHR Media, we thank you very much for listening, and we hope you'll tune in again tomorrow. Coming up next is the weather, and then after that, the Exceptional Conservative Show with Ken McClinton.
After that, the news and commentary with Dan Butcher here on the SHR Media Network at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific right here on SHR. Again, for all of us, thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. And as Corey Evans said, the weather is next. Here's Chris Fox.
From this weather system that continues its journey towards the Great Lakes. Now, we are going to see outbreaks of rain with some thunder mixed in turn to snow overnight. Areas like Iowa through Minnesota, Wisconsin could see around 5 to 10 centimetres of snow from this system, 2 to 4 inches, although the amount you see from place to place is going to vary significantly. But eventually we will start to see that snowy weather moving into parts of Canada as well. We could see a bit in southern parts of Ontario, maybe a little in southern Manitoba as well. Meanwhile, the Pacific Northwest having an unsettled day on Wednesday. A bout of heavy rain moving in off the Pacific, but it's still relatively mild. Temperatures into the mid-50s. We've still got dry and sunny conditions across much of California. Looking further east, well, temperatures are beginning to rise. In New York, we're looking at highs into the 40s through Wednesday. A lot of cloud, mind you. Outbreaks of rain not too far away, perhaps in western parts of New York State. A few showers into the Carolinas and Florida, where temperatures will push on into the low 80s with some sunny spells around here. I'm going to see similar temperatures in Miami over the next couple of days, but with an ongoing threat of a few thundery downpours, turning milder again in New York. Outbreaks of rain clearing away from the Pacific Northwest, and here the weather becomes dry and brighter towards the end of the week. Goodbye.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.